Good start. So this is Daisy Chute and Rebecca Brewer, who have rather brilliantly just aired the new version of COVEN, so live from the Queen's Theatre last night. And you watched it back last night as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
How was that? Talking of catching up, that is one of the things that you can do, isn't it? As artists, you can watch it back.
True. We were trying to see if we could see real-time comments, but I think that they don't let you do that on
actually,
They do.
yeah, it is now. It's on there, so I don't know whether it just
took a while or something. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. But yeah, no, yeah, it was nerve-wracking to watch it. Hi, Alex. Alex was actually doing the sound.
He did a brilliant
Although
job.
he can't do his own sound right now, it seems. So.
He keeps keeping quiet.
I'm joking. Hello.
Hey, sorry, I was just getting a cuppa.
Oh, no.
That's all right.
I didn't mean to humiliate you there. Sorry, just
diligent, being Zoom diligent, switching off mute. So,
Absolutely.
I think, it's really interesting. I was thinking earlier on about having a gig theatre piece at the Queen's. I'm not, because music and actor musicianship, they're kind of mixing a theatre and music obviously is an incredibly strong tradition. And I was just thinking how ripe the Queen's Theatre is to be a kind of centre of gig theatre. And there are lots of kind of reasons why I think that, and about accessibility and storytelling and direct audience connection. But, for our audience, it would be a really new form. And for me, it's a relatively new form, and I know other people are. So this is just the perfect opportunity to talk about that form and probably your relationship and how you got into gig theatre. But I know that you've got screen sharing and tools, so you've had a good old think about what you want to share with us. So I think we'll just let you talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll open it up to questions a little bit later on, unless it becomes interactive.
Well, yeah. Who knows? We'll try with it and see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Great, brilliant.
Yeah. So we can just kind of, we'll start with just explaining sort of how we ended up doing stuff together. So, Daisy and I are from quite different practices. So I trained as an actress on a musical theatre course. And then graduated and did a kind of mixture of plays and musicals. The musicals that I tended to be either new shows or revivals of shows. So I never did a sort of big, long-running West End show. It was always something just slightly different. And similarly, the plays that I found myself in sometimes had an element of music in them. And that's, to be honest, how I managed, because a lot of actors who train in musical theatre find it really difficult to transition into plays, and that was kind of how I could get in through the back door, really, because I could sing, and often they need people who can sing a song to go in a play. So in terms of experience, most of my experience has been as a performer, and then over the last sort of 2 or 3 years developed more into writing, because I'd always been involved in workshops. I love doing them. I absolutely love workshopping new material. And I think, so that might have been an interesting way into it. And then Daisy, you can talk about yourself.
Oh, yeah, okay, just about. How long have you got? I'll try and keep it short. Okay, so I had to do a sort of summary of myself, like a synopsis of my life earlier today, and I did go on quite a long time. But so music was my background and my present and hopefully my future. But I have done a bit of theatre stuff when I was younger, and but I don't really think of myself as an actor, really. But I sort of should stop saying that probably in front of people who are viewing me maybe as an actor in certain situations. But yeah, I've always sort of been more of a musician, so singer, a songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist. As you can see, I don't know if you can see, but I've got lots of instruments around me. I mostly do lots of music with quite a lot of collaborations, but mostly with other music people rather than theatre people. And I don't know how to summarize. I mean, I guess folk and Americana is the music that I write myself for my own project, but I trained in jazz and classical music and have been in lots of different projects along those lines as well. And I run a female folk collective called the Herd Collective, who we actually borrowed some musicians for last year's showing at Hornchurch in October. And so that's kind of, I'm running that as well as my own independent music, releases and gigs. I'm doing a lot of gigs. Well, I used to. Before,
Remember that? Do you remember gigs?
Yeah. So last year was like a insane kind of schedule of maybe about a gig every 2 days or something throughout the year. And like lots of festivals and things. So I got to play Glastonbury for the first time, which then we were excited that COVEN were invited to also play this year. Sadly, hasn't happened, but hopefully the invite still counts next year. We'll see. So I've been doing lots of more performing of my own thing and touring around different countries as well. I don't know. That's probably enough.
Sounds good.
So then we started collaborating probably about 3 years ago, and originally we were looking at making a piece that was going to be done for audio, and that still might happen, who knows, but it was a kind of story that would be done in headphones, and it was a story about a woman just kind of leaving her life and closing the door and going off missing for a while. And we wanted to look at music in that and sound world particularly in that, and we were interested in exploring the idea of somebody going somewhere on a journey themselves, when often the audience member would probably be listening to it themselves and sometimes going somewhere themselves as well. Because I definitely, before lockdown, I used to listen to podcasts a lot when I was traveling somewhere, so I was quite interested in that connection. So we started working on that, and then we got the idea for COVEN, and so that just went bye. And so then we started working on COVEN. So is now a good time to start talking about?
Yeah, I mean, well, so, just a little quick sort of maybe show of hands. I guess we can't see everybody, but we know obviously Alex was there yesterday. We know John was there, and Tom has just seen it. And I don't know about Jules and Holly if they're able to send a message.
Yeah.
You saw it, yeah, cool. And Jules, I don't know if you're able to respond either in the chat or.
Yeah, I saw it as well.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to check how much we need to explain about what you know what it is. Okay. So we talk a little bit about sort of what went into that, but we're talking quite a lot of general stuff that applies to lots of other things too in our little slideshow we've prepared.
Great. Okay. So here's the technical moment. Make a song out of everything. All right. 1 second. Let me just move you out of the way. All right. Can everybody see this?
Yes, I can anyway.
Great. If you move your grid on the right hand side, you might be able to see more of it. So basically, what we've been looking at is intersection between music and theatre. And I suppose disclaimer, labels sometimes are helpful and sometimes are unhelpful. And yeah, you can always find things that disprove any rule. So I guess that's just a helpful disclaimer to know going forward. So, why wouldn't that let me do that? There we go. So when music and theatre have babies, what we find is any and all of these things. You get musicals, opera, gig theatre, devised work, plays, sometimes plays with songs, song cycles, hip-hop theatre, cross-form work, cabaret, drag, folk music, that's an interesting one, concept albums, theatrical concerts, panto, spoken word, visual albums, and
probably lots more that we have forgotten.
Many more, yeah, that we probably forgot. So we found it kind of helpful to sort of put things on a bit of a scale. So if you've got theatre...
Oh, my mum wants to join this. She just messaged me.
Oh.
How do I share this with her? Oh God, this is going to be really embarrassing with her though. But I shouldn't not include her. I'm going to invite her. I think there's the invite link, right?
Is it open to everybody, Doug, or is it just the outer limits?
You can say no.
She can come.
Okay, I'll tell her to behave, all right? She's
okay.
If you were there in the Q&A yesterday, you might have seen my mum and her various comments. Okay, so I'm just going to send her the link, and maybe she might not be able to even click on it anyway. Who knows? We might get lucky. No, I'm joking. Sorry, that's so mean. I love my mum. Okay, keep going.
All right. So if we've got theatre on one side and music on another, we've sort of scheduled things roughly whereabouts we think they might be. So if you've got literally music on the right hand side, which is something like a gig or a concert, so something which is not trying to sort of behave in a narrative based way or a theatrical way, it's just living for the music, and that's its kind of reason for existence. And then on the other side you have a play, so something with literally no music whatsoever. We've sort of staggered things along this line. So if we go from left to right, you've got sort of plays with a couple of songs. So mainly you end up with kind of Shakespeare and stuff like that. So things where they just want to do a bit of a jig to sort of liven things up a bit. But it doesn't always serve dramatic purpose or content. Some devised work, text-based devised work, panto, you can see sort of roughly where we've put things. So there's some more examples on here. So we've sort of charted things roughly along in red. So we sort of thought the Crucible and Godot might be along this end, Shakespeare and panto. Then you've got things that are like musicals or operas. Then you've got, I don't know if anyone's seen Black is King, the Beyonce's visual album. If you haven't, it's awesome, check it out. But it's just a really interesting form, this thing about visual album, and I wouldn't even, it's hard to tell when one song stops and another one continues. It's very much that kind of like flow through experience. Obviously David Bowie and people who write sort of really serious concept albums and imagine characters and are sort of theatrical in that. And then you've got like Elvis or Dolly Parton. So like, yeah. Anything else on that, Daisy? So it's kind of just charting things along that line.
Yeah, so we were just kind of interested in how much music and was sort of the main part, and how much theatre was, and sort of that we're in the kind of murky middle ground where it could go either way, really. I mean, then we started going a little bit further into kind of the aspects about them that make music kind of less important or more important, depending on which is the next slide, really.
Yes, so let's get that. Next slide, please. So, yeah, how important, we sort of charted it by thinking about how important music is. So there's some terms down the bottom here which I needed to look up this morning. So if they seem unfamiliar, you are not allowed.
They've cut off the end, I think, the bottom of it.
Oh.
Is that just my screen?
I can see it, but that's probably...
Oh, okay. I can't see it totally, but it's fine.
Okay.
But it's the gist of it anyway. So yeah, non-diegetic and diegetic music. So or sound, you know. So I don't know. You can see the definitions there, and you might already know that anyway. But so the idea of non-diegetic being sound that a character can't hear, but is more mood setting. Diegetic meaning sound that is on stage or in a play or in a film or whatever that's actually audible by the characters. So whether it's like, you know, a telephone ringing, a radio, you know, something being played on the radio, or you know. Even like an onstage band as part of a scene or something, you know. But anyway, we'll talk about that in the next bit. So yeah, so the theatrical elements that we kind of, where music is sort of part of a play, where it's not that important necessarily, but it's sort of, well, it's important, but it's not sort of carrying narrative or characters along so much.
Yeah.
As it is later. Yeah.
So where it might be there just to sort of cover over a scene change or something like that. Then if you get further along the scale, so you've got diegetic music, so perhaps music in a bar or on the radio where a character might go, hey, I like this song, suddenly it becomes diegetic. So all of a sudden, if the characters realise that the song exists and start talking about it, first of all, I think that means you have to pay licensing. It's where PRS comes in as well. But it also means that it becomes diegetic. And also things like songs sung by performers in a show that aren't character-led. So it's not a character going... singing a song from their own perspective, but it could be, I think, a sort of song at the end of a Shakespeare or in the middle of a Shakespeare is quite helpful. Someone's like, oh, this is a song, here you go. Moving on from there, as you get more towards the importance of music across there, you get character-driven songs and songs which forward narrative. So I'll show you an example. This is from Hadestown. So if you listen to the lyrics in this, oh no, go back. Anyway, it's fine. I'll sort that out in a minute.
You can just click left. Oh yeah, it's fine. Okay.
Anyway, if you listen to this song, just listen to the lyrics and you can hear it's a conversation between two people. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
Who's gonna buy the wedding dance? Time's being my fan. Hard and getting harder all the time. But when I sing my song, all the rivers will sing along. They're gonna break their banks for us, and with their gold be generous. All the flashing in the pan, all to fashion for your hand. The river's gonna give us the
Cool.
So that bit is in Hades Town, which is the where, well, if anybody's seen it, I don't know if we can talk about it later maybe, but yeah, that's he's kind of trying to like convince her to marry him basically, and so she's saying, well, how are you going to afford a wedding? And so he's sort of talking her through all the ways he can make a wedding through kind of nature around him and that kind of thing. So that's sort of that conversation, which is moving the narrative forward and getting, you're getting to know the characters as you're hearing their perspectives. Yeah.
So then, as we get further along, you've got this one. So standalone songs which tell stories. So now we can get more into the world of what we might know as pop music. And 7 Days by Craig David is an absolute banger of a tune, but it's also a great example of a pop song that has got a really clear narrative structure, as you'll hear. All right, great. We get this. So,
so the important thing about that is that it's a story, but it's also a standalone song. So the song is not part of a body of work like a musical or an opera or a concept album or anything like that. That is, so it's kind of. I suppose actually we could have put concept album. Oh, never mind. I don't know where concept album belongs because it's sort of it's the one for before, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
Although they can be standalone song, kind of. Well, anyway, blah blah blah. There's a lot of kind of. It's hard to define certain things in the middle, but depends on the thing itself. But yeah, the fact that this is a standalone song, which isn't like, of course, it's part of an album maybe, but it's not connected to other songs. So it's not trying to tell a collective story with multiple songs. You know what I mean?
But it does have a very clear structure itself. You know from the beginning exactly what he did. All of the lyrics are completely necessary for the information that you need to require to know about Craig's 7 Days. So moving along from there, then we get standalone songs which focus more on emotion, but there's no specific story or character. So an example of this one, dum 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 dum, Happy by Pharrell. So if you look at the lyrics, I'll play it in a second, but basically you can even tell just by looking at the lyrics, he's just happy. That's all he's letting you know. There's no kind of like story about, there's not much detail in it. He's just happy, and he's happy at the beginning and he's happy at the end. And we don't really learn anything else other than that. And that's not to diss Pharrell and Happy, because it's it's a great tune. but like it doesn't exist for in the same way as 7 Days does, which has that kind of narrative. And I also thought on my dog walk about another great example of one of this, which is Groove Armada's I See You Baby Shaking That Ass.
Oh, perfect.
They see you baby shaking that ass at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, and there's nothing more to say about it. But yeah, so you'll get I'll just
God, she must be tired by the end, that's all.
Oh, honestly. Okay.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
He's happy at the beginning. You can tell.
Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break.
He sounds happy.
Hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy, I'm alone. If you feel like a room without room.
Are you happy for us?
I'm happy, I'm alone. If you feel like happiness is true. Because I'm happy, I'm alone.
Happy again.
You know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy, I'm alone. If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Great. So he's happy. We get the point. Again, I'm not being shady about that song. It is a great tune, but just if we're, So, here we go. So standalone songs which focus on emotion, but there's no particular or specific story. But there is more than what is on this side of it. So it's pure music. So instrumental music, so classical music, dance music.
But there could be anything, like any instrumental music, basically. Anything that doesn't have words is part of the thing. So pure music is like a term that is a kind of classical term. Like there was a sort of purist time, well, I mean, it still is, where people would consider that the purest kind of music to have no words because it's just about the music and not about anything else. So yeah, basically that's kind of a term from classical tradition rather than anything else. But pure music can be anything that's, in the sense that pure music can be anything that's non-word based. So even like a dance track that has like a couple of words is probably still in this category. But we were going to play you this one, I think, which combines both dance and classical.
Cool. Great.
And then it has a beat, just so you know. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so that's the point. Just it's non-words. That's what that one is. Yeah.
Non-words. Right.
Cool.
Fab. Okay. Great. So we've got our little scale, just helping us kind of chart things a little bit. So,
Becky, do you want to have a moment for questions, or should we wait till later?
Yeah. Well, let's have a. Yeah. Are there any questions on that? What we've said so far?
Questions or corrections or anything?
Yeah, corrections are also welcome. No, doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Cool. All right, sweet. Let's crack on. So,
is that your Google that's showing that? Oh no, it's mine. Sorry. Ignore me.
Don't stress me out.
I'm sorry. I was like,
why? What can people see? Is it my online banking or something? All right. So, what's your content? What is your content? So, content can align with form, or it can subvert our expectations. So we've written, our show COVEN is about witch trials in rural England in the 1600s and how it relates to today. So we decided to align the content and the form and write music that felt appropriate for the subject matter. So the music style, Daisy.
Yeah, so we've written it out as alt folk music with a modern twist. So that basically, I think that just sort of talking about how that reflects on how the content of the show. We're it's very much, we're talking about quite a long period ago, and so we're kind of borrowing very much from the folk traditions of that time. In fact, we're even using some actual folk music from that time, or near, in that kind of sensibility. Even we're even using a kind of fake monk chant, which we've subverted a little bit with the Latin translation of a phrase that sort of felt like it was appropriate for what we were talking about. And I don't know if should we just say? Okay. So we were trying to figure out how to
tell them when it is at the show so they can try.
Okay.
It's right at the beginning. So the beginning thing opens, and then there's like sort of atmospheric monk music. So how does the chant go, Daisy? Do you remember it?
Oh, I just made it up on the spot, to be honest.
Oh.
But it was
Really well researched.
I know, no. Well, just because it was just one of those things that I was looking at all these psalms from the time, and actually none of them were quite right for it. It just needed to be short and snappy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to sing it as a chorister, as like a 10 and 11-year-old, so I did that kind of stuff all the time, like 6 days a week. So it was just all sort of embedded anyway. But yeah, no, so we chose to use a Latin phrase that translates in English as, I have a small penis. So this is our way of subverting the norm a little bit, the form, to make a little bit of an in-joke with ourselves, to be honest, because we're talking about a pretty kind of awful man in history who's...
And also an in-joke with anyone who happens to speak Latin who's like, hang on a minute, that sounds like they're saying I have a tiny penis, which we are.
Yeah, anyway, so that just as an example of how we're using something really old, but also with that modern twist, so kind of using something, subverting it in a way that reflects the show, so it's very much within the show's world. So the show is the tone is kind of obviously talking, it's got a sort of, there's a lot. What we were saying yesterday, it was like we're pulling the rug underneath everybody the whole time, sort of trying to kind of play with your expectations and trying to kind of, pack a few punches with a few kind of maybe surprising facts or things that maybe kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure that I should learn how to talk about this better.
Pull the rug is fine.
Yeah, so pulling the rug. So we wanted to do a few musical things that were a little bit like that too, including some looping. So kind of almost like using the technology in a kind of magical way. Obviously, the world of witches is, we associate with magic, and we had a few moments as well that you might have clocked. One moment in particular that we where we were doing a like a song that was getting faster and faster, kind of quite a chanty song. Which was just after the Daisy Wheel, and it's called the Witch's Reel, and that's actually an old song that and it's taking actual text from what was it from
a witch trial. It's a transcript from a witch trial. I'm just going to stop my share a second because actually you don't need to be looking at this while we're talking to you. So we
okay.
can see each other.
So yeah, we actually took text. So whoever wrote, there's an old folk song. So there's no accreditation for it, but. Accreditation. Oh my gosh! Somebody stop me talking. Anyway, the point is that it was actually transcript from the witch trials, and so then we used that to kind of speed up, and then there was a moment where I played a loop that was faster than what we just finished, because we'd been speeding up, so it hopefully masked it well enough, and then we mimed along with the loop, and then left the microphones, and so it looked like it was happening. By magic kind of thing, and then we went and did a little dance, and so that was kind of, we wanted to do those kinds of magical moments that were that technology can allow, that wouldn't have been allowed in the 1600s, with the folk music that they would have been playing and listening to.
It's always taking. So the reason that we chose folk music and gig theatre as a form. It's really due to the content. So obviously witch trials tended to be rural areas, and there's an association between folk music and kind of rurality. I don't know if that's a word, but I keep saying it, so if it's not one, then I'm going to make it one. Rurality, why not?
Sounds good.
Pop it in the dictionary. And so also folk music in general tends to tell stories, so the structure of a folk song is often quite different from the structure of a song that's not a folk song, a pop song, for example. It's often like maybe they can be really, really long, can't they? Like 8 verses long, full of a different story. They're very, very narrative led, presumably because they were created to tell stories, right? To pass stories down.
Yeah, and actually, some of the elements that we discovered, we took out this from the show from last time, but we had broadside ballads as part of the show, which were literally, if anybody knows their history, they were used to kind of disseminate information, so people would know some famous tunes, and then people who would write lyrics to those tunes. Kind of almost like political, parodies, or like it was not always comedy. It was also, just various different things. And so we found quite a few about witch trials, and so we did some of that for the last time we showed showed at a horn church, but it wasn't fitting what we wanted to do this time. I think it's kind of maybe an extended version in the future.
Yeah. So and gig theatre was a definite choice as a form, particularly for Coven, for a bunch of reasons. One of them was about access, because I know Doug spoke earlier about feeling like gig theatre is more accessible. And my strong intention was always to make a show that, like, who would those witches be nowadays? And I don't want them to feel locked out of the theatre. And gig theatre feels just a lot more accessible to me personally. And I was trying to explain it to my family before they watched the video back today. It's quite a difficult thing to explain. You know, they're kind of like, they're going to be characters, you know, because they're so used to seeing people on stage and there being scenes and characters and things. But yeah, it's got a more kind of accessible feel, but also it feels a little bit more unruly than a musical, for example. And originally we wanted to explore the idea particularly of the Pendle Witch Trials. So we were like, oh, maybe this will be a musical about the Pendle Witch Trials, which is a really interesting story. But what we found out along the way is that actually one person's story is really interesting, but what we found more interesting was the wider movement. And it becomes more, of course, you can tell the story of a wider movement through one person's story, but we just wanted to do something a little bit different. So that sort of is why the form is how it is. And the way we made this show was music first. So I think we wrote about 7 songs together before we started writing any text whatsoever. And the way we wrote the songs was always, I want to write a song about X, and X might have, or like discovering X. So for example, the Bad Girls song with the loop effect, and the breath towards the end. It's the one that goes, sit down, my darling, come sit. It's in 3. Well, it's in 666 actually. Fun fact.
Well, it's 6/8. The time change was 6/8, but we did phrases of 6/6 just to be kind of like extra. And we did lots of all sorts of those kinds of little details that I quite like, little hidden messages in there, and like augmented fourth, which is known as the Devil's Interval. So we had lots of that stuff in there too.
Yeah. So that song was written we sort of were like, okay, well, we've not got a song for the devil. It feels like the devil needs to have a song. So originally that song was written to the brief of, we want to write whatever the devil's song would be. So then we started playing with things like, there's a whole thing about the Devil's Waltz, which always is quite famous as a sort of concept. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the Devil's Interval. So those sort of constructs help to create the song, and where the song now sits in the show is slightly different. It's now sort of becomes Matthew Hopkins' song, the guy who's the witch hunter general.
I quite like that kind of, that sort of paradox of, you know, he's accusing somebody of being coerced by the devil while he's coercing somebody, you know. So it's this hypocrisy of that they can be interchangeable, that role of the devil and this witchfinder.
And the witchfinder. Yeah. So yes, so gig theatre was always a very clean and cut choice as a form for what this is, and we've had
also, to be honest, practically from our point of view, like, you know, we you know, I'm from the gig world, you're from the theatre world, right? So I think it makes the most sense to kind of use our collective experiences together. And you know, I think had I been you know, maybe a more of an opera composer, maybe it could have been an opera. But you know, I think that we wanted to. I think a lot of Becky always was saying how important it was that it was sort of told in a way that would be true to the people who it was about, basically. So the idea of folk music being really, you know, integral to folk music is music of the people, like that. You know, that is how it's seen, as opposed to high art, which is the kind of opera, you know, high art, which is a terrible phrase, but you know, that idea of something that you have to pay a lot of money to go and see.
Yes, I just didn't want to steal these people's stories and then tell it in a way which didn't feel authentic to them, or that they wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with. So it was always a really conscious choice, and subverting standard kind of theatrical convention and structure again became something that was deliberate. So anytime that we deliberately try and make things feel unusual or slightly more chill than normal, it's all deliberate. It's not just like written on the back of a fag packet, even though sometimes parts of the show were. All right, cool. So let me just, let's carry on with my little PowerPoint guy. You can see this, yes?
Yeah.
Cool. Amazing. All right. I don't know what comes next. Let's see. Oh, look, subverting style and form. So we decided to go along with style and form, but you can choose to subvert it, which is super fun. Good example of that. So Hamilton, for example, if you said, okay, there's going to be this musical about one of the founding fathers of America, in my head, that musical would sound like Les Mis. It's kind of like historic. It feels like it's about the movement of the people, and that brings up the sound of Les Mis in my head. So by the fact that he's done it using rap music and hip hop music and the whole world and culture of that, the Lin-Manuel Miranda is subverting our expectation of what that show is going to sound like, which is perhaps one of the reasons that it's so awesome and exciting. Then you've got sort of subverting form. So Anna Nicole, which is an opera about Anna Nicole Smith. I hate these terms, highbrow and lowbrow, but please forgive the clumsiness of them. I'm going to use them just because it sort of is a shorthand for what we're trying to say. So an opera about Anna Nicole Smith, those two things create the most wonderful intersection of a Venn diagram. But in theory, you're like, oh, that sounds strange and unusual. So you're subverting people's expectations, creating an opera about something that traditionally we don't expect an opera to be about. Similarly with Jerry Springer the Opera, which, is it a musical, is it an opera? Who knows, they call it an opera. And then Frankenstein by BAC Beatbox Academy. If you haven't seen what this show is, Google it and check it out. It's made by Conrad Murray, who's an awesome hip-hop theatre maker, and he runs the BAC Beatbox Academy. And they created this show telling the story of Frankenstein. They don't have a single instrument on stage. They literally do all of it with their gobs, and it's amazing. And they've taken this story, again, something that seems kind of slightly older, more archaic, I guess, as a story, even though it's still an incredible story, but they've just infused it with a really current spirit, which is really exciting. So check it out. But subverting style and form, super fun thing to do.
I think that I remember my mum, who's actually on this call, saying at one point, genius, I think, is defined by, well, not defined, but one aspect of genius is putting two things that are seemingly very different and finding a way to meld the two. So that's an example of that.
Yeah.
All those.
Amazing. Oh, I've tried to press the next one, but there we go. So, all right. So features of gig theatre. So we chose gig theatre. We landed on gig theatre. So we might have characters, or it might be more autobiographical / lecture based. So we landed on more autobiographical / lecture based. Because of reasons that I spoke about earlier, that we thought the movement was more interesting than one person's particular story. But there are gig theatre shows which have characters. A lot of middle child's work tell the story of characters. So you can do either or. The show might feel more like an album with tracks, in inverted commas, being either songs or scenes. So there's a show called, I think, The Sad Club, which is a gig theatre show that was made for NT Connections. And that felt quite like a collage, almost like a meditation on a theme, and the theme being mental health and being a young person and those two things. And the show really felt like a track listing. So it was like maybe track 1 would be a scene, and then track 2 would be a song, and then, you know, they kind of switched it up. So that's a fun thing to think of. Often what you get if you go down that route, what comes out of that machine is something that feels quite collagey, but again, super cool to play around with. So obviously then you've got aesthetic. So microphones, just being able to see everything. So seeing all the bones of it, which was something that I was obsessed with in Coven, as Daisy knows, because she's like, are you sure you don't want someone else to operate the sound key? I was like, no, I want them to watch me bending down and pressing spacebar like the guy in Sleaford Mods. So yeah, aesthetic. So there's this thing in gigs where, you know, you can see you see how it all operates. There's no lies told in gigs, and I feel like we tell, this is going to be
Well, that's not totally true.
controversial.
I think when we go into you know, you get into really high end gigs, and like, you know, when I saw Muse live, and it's just like
Yeah.
3 of them and like dotted around the O2 Arena on different like balloons, you know, like just like obviously a lot of it was track. It wasn't all of them live, you know. It was very much a theatrical kind of
Right.
show that didn't feel like it was us just sort of piling into some grubby pub and listening to them and it could have been unplugged, you know.
Yeah.
It was very slick, and it was all video installation. It was all like incredible visuals.
Yeah.
So, you know, it doesn't always have to be that case for a gig, but yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's good. It's good. This is the thing. For everything you're like, hey, how about this? There's always a, yeah, but what about this?
Yeah.
Another thing is duration. Gigs in the theatre, they don't tend to last the same amount of time. And there's different expectations in terms of, I'll put front of house rules in quotes there. There's different expectations. So often at a gig, you know that you might be able to move around. You might be able to take photos, to talk to your mate, to go and get a drink, to bring your chips in, whatever you want to do. And again, that was another reason that we chose this style for Coven, because it is something, again, it's all about that original question of would our witches enjoy themselves, which is the sort of whole important thing about it. So some features. One thing that we haven't talked about, but perhaps we'll move on to that actually at the end, because I've nearly finished with the PowerPoint, is multiple spaces, Daisy. Can you remind me to talk about that in a second?
Multiple. Oh yeah, because we talked about it on the phone. Yeah, got it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So
is now a good time to talk about it, just while we bring it up?
We're nearly done with the PowerPoint,
Okay.
and then I figure it's just more interesting that if we can see everyone.
Okay, sure.
I just don't like looking at my own handwriting. All right.
Your own handwriting? What?
I know. Okay, so music-based, we've got your little list if you're interested. So we've done some music-based recommendations and some theatre-based recommendations one. So music-based recommendations, these are all artists that live more in the kind of music world, but their work has an element of narrative. So Mary Ann Meets the Gravediggers is an album by Regina Spektor. It's an awesome album. Every single one of the songs is like a short story, and they all sound super different, and the sound of the music changes depending on what the story's about. So check that out. Black is King, I've talked about it earlier. Check it out. I can't really try to explain it other than it's a visual album, and if you're wondering what that is, once you've watched it, you'll see that there's kind of no other explanation for it other than it's a visual album, because the visuals are as exciting as the audio world of it. But it has quite a clear, it tells a story. It's really filmic, so it's well worth a watch. Kate Tempest, I've just put her down because, sorry, they've just changed their name. Kate Tempest, I should have remembered that.
Oh, really?
So Kate, huh?
I didn't realise they changed it. Oh.
Yeah. They
Okay.
just changed their name. So
I saw them at Glastonbury. It was just the best thing I saw at Glastonbury. Just to
right.
say.
So
Euphoric.
Kate Tempest is a spoken word artist, and they make spoken word, but a lot of their albums they release albums, but they also release books. I've got a bunch on the shelf. And their work is, so they did this one show called Brand New Ancients, which was sort of looking at Greek gods and kind of who those people would be now. But check out Kay Tempest's work. So it should be, just basically delete the T in your head here. So it should be Kay Tempest now. My bad. The clashes between Wiley and Stormzy. So grime culture. I'm not going to go into detail about this because I don't know enough about it to make a lot of sense. But they do clashes, and have a look at the clashes between Wiley and Stormzy, because they actually have got a lot of narrative in them. It's basically an argument between two people done through the medium of grime music, but check them out.
I'm kind of imagining like Eminem 8 Mile now.
You can imagine that.
Just like a rap battle or something, I don't know.
It's different to that, but it's really fun.
Cool.
Okay, and any of David Bowie's stuff, so kind of concept album based stuff, and then the Kinks, Daisy, this one was your suggestion, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, well yeah, I mean Becky and I were just messaging a bunch of different ideas, and basically when I think about concept albums, I think that there's so many like prog rock albums. Like we could have spent all session talking about that, but the reason I mentioned the Kinks is just because sort of well, we actually both have a connection to the Kinks, so so I just sort of wanted to put them in there. But yeah, I think just because it's sort of Ray Davies kind of creating characters that he then kind of puts in different albums later on as well. So this was the first time this appears in his catalogue, and so that in itself is quite interesting, that the kind of the sort of alter egos, sort of like David Bowie's alter ego Ziggy Stardust, you know, they kind of pervade through a career as well, and they can have their own little life, which is an interesting little thing. But yeah, we both, I mean, Ray, we've both worked with Ray in different ways, and so and of course he's done his own jukebox musical, Sunny Afternoon, which Becky was workshopping in the early days of it. So
Yep.
yeah, but we haven't even talked about jukebox musicals, which is a whole other thing.
Anyway. All right. So then, last page of recommendations. So theatre-based recommendations. So theatre which lives more in a music type land. Okay. So again, I've put Frankenstein because obviously I really want you to check it out. And then Conrad Murray, who directed Frankenstein, he is making lots of hip hop theatre. He's a beatboxer. I think he's like the third best beatboxer in the UK. If he's better than that, he would be mad at me. Obviously, I just downgraded him if he's actually the best. But he's awesome.
He's your best anyway, you know?
He's my best. Yeah, just tells awesome stories through the medium of hip-hop theatre and beatboxing. Hadestown, which is the show that we played the first song, the wedding band song. She describes it as a folk opera, which is written by Anais Mitchell, who's a folk and Americana, would you say, Daisy?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
folk, rootsy, kind of, yeah, that sort of thing.
So it was on at the National, so I suppose you could say it looked more like a theatre piece, but it's definitely along that line. Islander.
We both love this.
Which is
I
great.
saw it at a Fringe Festival, and then it came down to Southwark Playhouse where Becky saw it.
Yes.
And, that's a two-hander. Yeah, it was really cool. It's just basically about a very small Scottish island in Scotland, and it was done by it was performed by two actor musicians who the whole soundscape was just created by their voices and looping and everything. So that was quite an inspiration for us for the show.
And then Anna Nicole, The Last Shit by Sting, which is a musical that Sting wrote, and then Six. So Six is really interesting because they've checked their structure, their duration is shorter, so I think it's like 90 minutes long, and it looks like a pop concert, but it tells the story of Henry VIII's 6 wives. I think that's
actually, we know the writers of that because they do Signal as well, and they've been very nice about Coven, which is lovely.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really cool, and that's very much subverting the norm again. So the idea that subverting the kind of using music style that you wouldn't expect for that subject matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. So
I guess
venues. We're going to talk about that, weren't we?
Yeah. Well done.
So yeah, talking about actually, yeah, the look of Six being a kind of pop concert, but so far from what I've seen, it's been in theatres, but I haven't seen it being played in a venue. But that would be interesting to see. I'm sure they would have a following for that, because I know that it's got quite a kind of a following from especially younger people. So it's the sort of thing that could translate to something like an arena, you know, like it would be.
Totally.
Yeah. But so that the idea of venue, because I mean the one thing that we've discovered that's been quite a nice bonus of being in these two adjoining worlds is that we have kind of double the amount of places to perform this. So we have the potential to perform it in theatres, of course, but also in gig venues, that spaces that I'm used to playing, and between us we have different people we know in those worlds which have offered us opportunities. And so so for instance, Glastonbury, of course, they have theatre and circus as well, but it's sort of it's not as big as the music part of Glastonbury, which is I guess one of the main focuses really. So kind of in a way, some way easier to get in on a lineup because there's more music than there is theatre. So and so, you know, and it's kind of interesting because talking to people in those worlds about something theatrical, they're like really excited by it because it's different for them. In the same way that probably in the theatre world, people are excited by the idea of the gig aspect of it and the fact that it's different to the usual musical, or perhaps even more affordable to put on than the usual musical, which is a lot more, you know, a lot more bells and whistles. So from a practical point of view, it can work in our favour for that, you know, being in that form that's sort of cross form, you know.
Yeah, and it also means that we can do. So we've gone and played 4 Coven songs in Borough Market.
Yeah.
just the songs, and that's worked just as well. So again, one of the kind of benefits of gig theatre is that you can do all the show, or you can do 10 minutes of the show and just do the songs. So it's sort of it's more flexible, but again, it comes down for me to access. So always wanted to make something that can go everywhere. Can it be in a pub? If the answer is yes, then I think it sounds like a good idea, just because like lots of people feel comfortable in a pub, but not always do you find everyone feels comfortable in a theatre. So for me, that was always the main focus of it. So I think takeaways mainly are not walking blindly into something without really understanding why you want to make it in a certain form. So to just be like, I want to make a gig theatre show, but not necessarily know why or how your content fits into that, either directly or by subverting it. It might be an interesting process, but in my head, I can't immediately see how that would work. I feel like you need to use these labels and forms to your advantage. Again, either align with them or subverting with them, playing with expectations in that way all the time. Yeah.
Trying to say something new with something old, always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know how to sort of conclude. Yeah, but that does everybody have any questions about anything in particular?
Yeah,
I think it's great if we open it up. I mean, thank you. There's so much detail there, and it's really lovely to get an insight into the choices behind it, and how and you can tell because of the quality of the work how thought through moment by moment it is. Do people want to ask any questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I guess I think it'd be really interesting to know like what was harder in terms of, obviously most of the show is the songs, but was it harder to like try and find the theatre stuff, if you want to call it that, the stuff that sort of intersperses each of the songs and has to flow through and has to connect everything together and to make the show? Was that harder than making all of the songs together, or which took more time? Or
so I think cumulatively, I think the songs have taken more. I think we spent more time writing music than we did writing text. The text was, we'd sort of been collecting ideas about themes that we wanted to discuss, and then we just sort of put them on a couple of pages of A3 on Daisy's living room floor that you can see behind you. That floor was just covered in like, we've got all these ideas, but we've said it's going to be 60 minutes. How are we going to sort of channel it down?
Yeah.
And so actually the I suppose script, because it is scripted, that took quite a lot. That was quite quick, wasn't it, really?
I think, it's been in a way that the music hasn't been as sort of edited, and like we've had a few rehashings depending on who's playing with us, but otherwise it's been mostly, we've had a few tweaks here and there, but the script has been quite adapted a few times and changed, and we've kind of pushed and pulled around with it a bit and changed the order of things. But because the previous version was similar, but there were some pretty big changes actually that we made it in a way, because we added a couple more elements and we took away, as when I say elements I mean songs, and we took away a few songs as well. But we I don't know, we flipped the order quite a bit, and I think we were really thinking about how it could flow and make sense with the songs as well, so that the songs could sort of illustrate a point that we were making previously, or follow on from the point we just made, or whatever.
Yeah, it was we tried to make sure that nothing felt shoehorned in. So if there was a song that we had, so there were 2 songs that we cut this time round, and one of them we only cut fairly recently, I suppose, and that was just because we felt like there was just no clear place for it in terms of the structure, and it didn't really have a relevance. We sort of had said the point that it was making already, so that went in the bin. But yeah, so it just
also that was helpful for me because I had a ukulele in that one and I didn't have to bring that with me there, which is helpful.
So yeah, we did a little bit of like, it was more like just redoing a jigsaw really, and not really 100% knowing what it was, more sort of removal processes. But if it was feeling too difficult, it was a sign for us that perhaps it wasn't right. And so that was always the stuff that we would sort of highlight in a different color in the Google Doc and went, this might go at some point.
Yeah,
and then
we had quite a big change that we took away. We thought last time, I mean, when I say we, Becky was mostly the driving force behind the script as more of the theatre person, whereas I was sort of a bit more in the music, but we were, you know, pretty equal in the music. But Becky was doing doing quite like big overhauls, because the first draft was we had a character that we kind of pinned it to lots of parts in the story, so it was sort of that we followed the story of Ursula, who is a local witch in Essex, and so that was punctuating throughout the whole piece. And then when we removed her, it kind of gave us a lot more space to say other things that we felt like we hadn't had a chance to say. And so that was, I think, but that was kind of a moment of, do we miss having that personal? But then we decided that actually the personal thing is us. You know, we're the personal thing, because it's that process of writing it, researching it, and finding out our own connections to this world that we think that is so removed from us, but yet isn't.
And I should say as well, the fact that we deliberately reveal how we made the show in the show is another thing about Access. It's just another thing of going, here's this thing, and here's literally all of the things that make it.
These are the workings out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if and it's kind of a sort of follow up to that, but you were saying obviously that there was like big changes in maybe like the script or something, but then did that have like the reverse, and something that you've come up with the script and you've gone, oh, that would be really good, and we'll change this song drastically to fit what that is? Or
yeah, we've had moments. Well, I mean, yeah, sorry, I mean mostly because we had a few moments of spoken word within songs. So for instance, Incantation for Rain has been 3 different versions. That the middle section that had talking through it. The first time it was about Pendle witches. Second time it was
about Ursula.
Ursula, yeah. And then the third time it ended up being about your grandmother. So it's adapted, but that's more the actual scripting of it. And for all of them, the message of the song still made sense, because it was about this sort of symbol of what the rain meant in different ways, you know, and the kind of incantation for rain, like the idea of that being a symbol for, you know, for nature being an important part. And I think that worked, an important part of that rural community and farming and like that, you know, and that whole section about enclosure was as a new addition as well, that fits so well with that idea of like, you know, these, you know, droughts that, you know, and farmers sort of aghast that their crops were failing and blaming witches, you know, that works so well with that song, you know, because obviously we were trying to call for the rain to happen. And you know, it's amazing how you will, like your grandmother, the idea of, you know, the clairvoyancy, you know, and how you kind of, not to discredit her in any way, but like the trying to, you know, pin things that you believe.
She'll hex you if you.
Yeah, I'm just like suddenly nervous now. But you know, like when you see something happening and you kind of want to pin it to something you've done, like you have some sort of power over the rain, you know, and I know there's, you know, there's a whole question mark behind a lot of last year's writing process. I was constantly feeling anxious about the offending kind of witch communities, and actually trying to not sort of say that those things don't exist, at the same time also kind of be slightly cynical about them, and realize that belief has also led to such destruction that, you know, so I was constantly in this kind of turmoil, you know, inner turmoil about that whole process of not wanting to offend different beliefs and different groups of people. And anyway, that's just my personal, sorry, I just went off on one there. Anyway, but then we actually, last time when we did the show in Hornchurch, we had a group of witches come up to us afterwards who were local and said that they felt it was really respectful, and actually it told, you know, it told the story as they'd come in with they'd come in a little bit like on the back foot, you know. I don't think they expected it to be respectful, but I think that they came away and they came up to us to say that they were, you know, I don't know, that they felt like it was you know, a good telling of that story, you know. So
Daisy,
sorry,
can I interrupt you?
Yes, Mum. Hi.
The gig theater, what I worry about is that if you're trying to schedule a tour or you're going to a theater, you've only got an hour show. How do they program you for an hour show? Because it's an awful lot of effort for people to come out for 1 hour.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
Maybe, Doug, you can help us with that as someone that's more involved in programming than we are. Is that a problem for people?
Yes, it can be if they come and watch a full, if it's in the main auditorium, and they come. It depends on the price as well. To be honest, it depends how much you're paying. I think the form of it is, the gig theatre. Its expectations of different audiences as well. I think, to be honest, I think a younger audience will be really thrilled with the form of it and also the length of it. I would say that I actually really enjoy an hour-long piece as well. There are lots of different people who do. I think it's the way that you market it, it's the way that you promote it. I do think it's a lot about the price. I do think it's a lot about the ticket price. So if it was a £40 ticket, yeah, you might go, and it hasn't had bells and whistles and magic and lights and then so I don't think it's a problem an hour. I mean, in fact, actually, Edinburgh, it's the perfect time, isn't it?
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, originally we were supposed to be in Edinburgh Fringe this month, so that was always the aim for us, is to get an kind of compact hour-long version. But
it's the venue as well, isn't it? You were talking about venue, kind of expectations in particular venues as well.
And I think as well, if you look at what Six have done in London with the Arts Theatre, is they've actually taken it and they've done different time shows.
Yeah.
They fit into the gig format really well by doing a later show, so they can do an early one for the younger audience, a later one for the people who've been out for a drink and things. So there are different audiences for that kind of thing.
It's funny to say that, John, actually, because one thing, obviously, that a lot of our songs have swearing in and that they're not appropriate for, we've got 14 plus is our guideline. But we were like, we should totally make a kids version of this, where it tells the story, but it's more aimed at children and young people.
Yeah.
I would be psyched to kind of create the flip side, but also we know that we can do back-to-backs, because we basically did a back-to-back yesterday, because we only finished our rehearsal at 10 to 7 and we were like, oh god, we got 20 minutes, quick, put some pasta in your throat before we start.
Exactly.
So the back-to-backs, it's an interesting thing.
We had another idea at one point to do a kind of B-side. I mean, talking of B-sides, we actually have a B-side, which is this zine.
Oh yeah, we made it.
Which features lots of different contributions from different writers and artists, and kind of stuff that's specially made for this, and a bit of history, and including actually my mum's photograph at the very end of this. This is the makeshift memorial. So we were saying that there's no official memorial, but this is a kind of makeshift memorial in Scotland, in Perthshire. Actually, Mum, you could probably just talk more about it. Maggie's Wall.
Well, it's in Dunning, Dunning. I can't tell you anything more about it.
That's fine.
I took the photograph 40 years ago.
That's fine. Okay, we don't have to talk about it. But just the idea of the B-side, the version that might be like a kind of Coven after party, that's kind of like actually maybe getting a few guests on and doing a few like music sets and sort of maybe a bit of spoken word and just like stuff that's kind of not necessarily related, but like the idea of a kind of just like a sharing of music and words and different people, and we have different guests. So we had an idea for the Fringe that we might do like a once a week kind of special guest spot. What are you laughing at?
No, I know that there's a question in the chat that I need to
sorry, I haven't seen it.
It's okay. No, it's fine. Carry on what you're saying.
No, it's fine. I think I finished anyway. But the idea that maybe we could extend it beyond an hour is what I'm trying to say. We could have like I don't know how that would look yet, but something like that would be interesting. So yeah, but anyway, so the question, let's get to the question, because I realised how late it is and I'm meant to be doing another stream in 5 minutes.
Question in the chat says, Alex says, you said that in some instances you have performed the songs from Coven purely in gig format. Would you ever be tempted to move in the opposite direction, create a more theatrical piece telling the story with characters and set, etc.?
Interesting.
I don't feel particularly drawn to that. And I think, I don't really know, I think maybe it's the writing process that we didn't really sort of write the songs with specific characters in mind. There was sort of one or two that maybe we did, but I think generally the songs are about themes or an element of the witch trials that we wanted to talk about. but also I'm not quite sure. I think the second that happens, the second it looks more like a different type of thing. I think maybe I'm just struggling to imagine it, but I don't feel particularly drawn to it.
I'm more drawn to kind of collaborations that are other kinds of worlds. So like the idea of the shadow puppetry or things that maybe more magic-y stuff that could kind of make it more of a show without it being about the characters, because it's I think it still wants to have the tone that we've set, and the songs. I mean, they could have the songs could be sung by different people, or we could have more of a band behind us, and it's still very much us two, led, in terms of the story. But I could see ways it could expand, but probably like that would be quite an overhaul for the writing to make it character and sort of proper full on set. But I don't know. Also,
just whenever I tried to write, I did try at some point to write sort of a script that characters might say, almost like more of a musical, but just every time I tried to do that, it just felt a bit naff. So I think it's something about truth is stranger than fiction in this. The second something goes on stage, it sort of has an element of going, well, this is a story. And so then it sort of makes our mind maybe think that, is it true? Is it not true? And, the words that you're writing, well, that's probably not exactly what the person said. And I think the thing about the show is going, hey, this is what the truth is. And so it makes it feel easier to be truthful in the kind of gig-based format.
True. Could I ask you as audience members, what were your expectations going in, and were they totally undermined, or like, I don't know, were they what was your expectation when you read about it?
I think I imagined it as you did it from what you said.
That's good.
Maybe that's because I've spent a lot of time up in Edinburgh, so I kind of have seen that kind of approach a few times. And then last night I started to think, actually, character based, and you could bring all these other people in, but I've overnight I've changed again on that, and I've been back to the fact, I actually like the fact it was the two of you telling the stories, and that was the important part, was the fact that you could switch between those two people, and that doesn't stop you bringing other people musically into it, but actually the minute you start to try and go out to too many characters, it does become not necessarily problematic, but it just takes the focus away a bit. I actually quite like the fact that the focus really is on you two telling us the stories.
I think we were kind of, working to the brief that we had, which is the two of us performing it, and so we wrote for that. So I think the most successful way of writing that is to bring ourselves as the characters in a way. But I suppose imagining it beyond us two performing it, that's like I don't know how to even begin to imagine that, to be honest. But it'd be interesting to see if anybody else could take on the roles that we've created and sort of pretend that's their story. You know what I mean?
Having that conversation just today, I think my interest would be if ever we, one of us couldn't do it or something, I'd be so curious to find somebody else, but then also to look at what their story was, because what's really interesting is that probably everyone is linked to this in some way, shape or form,
and that's kind of the fun of it as well, that we that there's the search for that, but that is a lot of work to get all those rewrites, and and it's sort of
it only took us a day to do this version of the script. It's fine. It's just
shh, don't tell.
Oh yeah.
We should sign off because you got to go, Daisy.
Yeah,
You've got to do another live stream. So
it's insane night tonight. But sorry to be abrupt. But yeah, if I leave you with Becky, is that cool? And Becky can do closing thoughts.
Yeah,
thank you very much, and thanks, Mum, for watching as well. Thank you everybody for watching last night, and lovely things. If I leave, it doesn't affect anything, right?
No, it doesn't.
Okay,
No.
Cool.
No.
Okay.
Bye. Daisy.
Yeah.
Comb your hair.
I know. It's still wet from the shower. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
So, just as they're going, any takeaways from this, just about gig theatre or inspirations for the show? It'd just be great to hear things.
I was kind of just gonna also, in sort of answering the expectations question as well, because I think this was the first full piece of gig theatre that I'd seen. I've seen scratches here and there, but so it was really so not a lack of expectation in the sense that I didn't really know what a full gig theatre show might look like, and I think it was really interesting that from scratch to full piece that I've seen, it's still like you can still see all the bare bones of the staging and all this kind of stuff that you were saying about keeping it real and truthful as well. But even in the sense that the songs might not have been as story centric as I might have expected, but I think the fact that you went the route that you taken made it a bit more open for us to sort of almost like you were reading a book. People say when you read a book you can imagine things a little bit better, and it's sort of down to you as well to create those worlds. And that's what I was kind of doing when I was watching it as well. You can sort of sit back, and when the songs are playing, at least at points you're sort of closing your eyes, especially when you've got the loop stuff and all the atmosphere and everything. There's this kind of, you know, it's down to it. I'm doing part of the work as well, and we're sort of making it together in a kind of a weird way. And there's that kind of, well, it might just be more specific to Witches and this one, that you're kind of mixing this show together in this like thing that was really nice actually when I was experiencing it. So it kind of surpassed expectations in that sense.
That's so lovely to hear that you had that experience. Thank you for sharing that.
So, and any other takeaways? Yeah, great. All right, we should finish there. So there isn't a session next week, but there is a session the week after, which is going to be a networking session, but also thinking about what the future of what Outer Limits Online can be doing. So it'll be a really great way. It's a kind of like end of term party. Ooh. Online. So, well, I'll send you more information about it. It's a chance to get to know each other a little bit more, similar to the session that we did a while back. Great, thanks very much. Have a lovely evening. Thanks so much for your hard work, Rebecca and Daisy, over the last couple of days as well. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.